Welcome to the Momentum Lifestyle Podcast, where we interview an inspiring, educational, and entertaining guest to help you build confidence, find balance, and live a life of impact. We'd like to thank our sponsor today, Be Spunky. Now, Blake, Gino, and myself have been using their Reboot product for well over 6 months now, and it has been life-changing. I found myself recovering faster, having way more energy throughout the day, and honestly feeling just more jacked up as a man. And this is because Reboot is clinically formulated to support healthy male hormone levels, providing stress relief, improved strength and stamina, enhanced drive, and overall well-being. Be Spunky Reboot contains a proprietary blend of 10 natural and organic herbs and active ingredients that are renowned for helping men to enhance physical and cognitive performance, improve stamina, energy, and endurance, optimize testosterone levels, support healthy reproductive function, support cardiovascular function, relieve stress, mild anxiety, irritability, relieve tiredness, fatigue, support healthy sleep patterns, and support healthy body weight. So as you can see, it is a must-have product for all men. So head to their website, bespunky.com.au, that's bespunki.com.au, and use the code MOMENTUM to receive 10% off all Be Spunky products.
Dean Blankfield, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Blake. Great to be here.
Mate, we're going to rip into all things money mindset and a lot of how business problems are often personal problems wrapped up as business problems. But before we get started, can you give the guys a 90-second life rundown of who you are, what you do, and what's got you to where you are now?
Firstly, thanks for having me, buddy. It's great to connect with like-minded people. 90 seconds, Well, I'm not really one for introductions. It's generally how I start these podcasts.
Yep.
But especially in 90 seconds, I don't think I could tell you what I had for breakfast in 90 seconds, but let's give it a whirl. I think to tie everything into what we're talking about today, the pivotal point in my life, there was two big ones. One is when I realized that I don't want to work for a boss. I want to work for myself. One of my number one values is freedom. Every decision I made in life from that moment was, how can I have more freedom? How can I be more free, whether it's in regards to money, relationships, business, house, mortgages, everything that enslaves me, I didn't want any, a bar of it. And anything that gave me more options and more flexibility, that's the decision that I wanted to go down. That was spurred from me being in a 9-to-5. And I had a conversation with my boss at the time. I sat him down and I said, mate, you've been working at this job. He was my sales manager. You've been working this job for 20 years. How much money do you make? And he wouldn't answer the question. And I go, mate, you've been here for 20 years. Just let me know what I'm looking at here. I've been here for 3. I want to know what the trajectory of my life is. Long story short, he was working 9-to-5. He was earning about $120,000 a year. He had no purpose, had no mission, had no vision. He was just kind of in the 9-to-5, stuck in the rat race. And that moment, I thought, you know what? I don't want to do this. This is not what my life looks like. That was the first pivotal point. And the second one, in that job, one day they asked me to go give a presentation. And in that presentation, I had a full-blown panic attack. Nothing came out, no words, nothing. And that spurred me into basically quitting my job, doing my own thing, getting stuck in the self-development industry, finding mentors, therapists, like whatever it is. And in 90 seconds, I think that those are the 2 points that kind of brought me to where I am now.
You did well. It's about 90 seconds, give or take. So
thanks, buddy.
With values, and I love how you approached it. And I think a lot of people's careers and lifestyles would be very different if they really lived aligned with their values. How did you go about working out your values, and what's a common theme that you see for people who potentially feel stuck when it comes to their careers?
I think the biggest problem with values is the same problem that people have in their own lives. They're not investigated. And a life, I think there's that classic quote, don't quote me on it, but it's something like, a life uninvestigated is a life not worth living. And that's kind of how I felt. So my initial values, when I sat down, had a good hard look at myself, what do I want out of life? Like what exactly do I need? And that always starts with the values. And I realized that what is my number one value? Well, number one was health, obviously, because without health, you got nothing. And number two was freedom. the ironic part about the whole situation is wind the clock forward 10 years. And I realized that having freedom as a number 2 value was actually my biggest trap, because I couldn't be in a relationship if freedom was very high on my priority list. So I think for people that are stuck, the first thing they've got to look at is, where exactly are they? Because you can't know where you're going, or you can't have a goal of where to go if you don't know exactly where you are. It's that classic metaphor. If you get in your car and you don't know where you are and you don't know where you're going, you'll forever go around in circles. And so I think the first thing for people that are stuck is to look at, where are they and what values do they have? Because they think they may value money, but really they value instant gratification, because they spend all their money on things like consumables that give them short bursts, little rushes. They look for that rush. And at the end of the day, they've got no money in the bank. They got more month left at the end of the money. So I think people that are stuck have to have a good, hard, honest look. The best way to do that is with a coach or a third party who's unbiased, who can point out and say, listen, buddy, you say you value money, but you really don't. You value instant gratification, like I said before. Or you say you value health, but you don't. You value sugar, or you're not disciplined, and you value things that are going to give you some sort of boost of serotonin. Because what it really takes to value money is discipline, hard work, efficiency, all these sort of things.
Do you see in the work that you do and what you've seen firsthand that there tends to be a gap between someone's ideal values, what they kind of think are their values, and underlying the values that they're actually showing up with on a day-to-day basis?
100%. I think I had this conversation to a client the other day. She lives in a fantasy land. Everyone lives in a fantasy land. They've got this picture in their head of what they think is going on, where they think they are, what they think the problem is. And they've created this, like, they've watched way too many Hollywood movies, and they've created this never, never land in their mind. They believe that things are going in a certain way. And that's only because they haven't taken the time to really investigate what's going on, where they're at, what are the obstacles, what are the hurdles, where do they want to go? Most people have no idea where they are and where they want to go. One of my mentors, he's a monk, and he told me the story. He said, there's a master and a disciple, and the master taught the disciple how to shoot archery. And so for 5 years, this disciple was practicing archery. One day, the master says to the disciple, let's go to the forest. I want to teach you something special. So the disciple gets very excited, goes, shit, I've been shooting the same way for 5 years. And now the master, he's going to take me to the next level. So they go into the forest, and the master says, take this blindfold and put it on me. And so this disciple's getting very excited. He's thinking, shit, this master's going to teach him how to shoot with a blindfold on. Like, this is beyond next level. Anyway, he puts the blindfold on. Then the master tells the disciple, take this apple and go walk 200 yards and put it anywhere you like on a tree. And so this disciple's getting all excited, and he walks and he takes this apple, he puts it on a tree. He comes back and he's so excited to learn this lesson, this golden nugget that he's been promised from the master. The master goes, now spin me around 5 times. So the disciple goes, he can't hit this. He's got a blindfold on. The apple's 200 yards and I'm spinning him around 5 times. So he spins him around 5 times. The master goes, you ready? The disciple goes, yes. The master pulls the arrow, and the arrow goes straight into the floor. And the disciple goes, what are you doing? You promised me this golden nugget. You made me put a blindfold on, spin you around 5 times, and put the apple on the tree 200 yards. He goes, this is the lesson. He goes, what's the lesson? He goes, well, if you can't see where you're shooting, you're never going to hit it. This is a common pattern that I found in my life, especially early on. And people that I coach, they've got the blindfold on and they have no idea what they're looking at. They're completely blinded and unaware to where they're at, their psychological obstacles, which is the number one thing. And they have no idea, they can't see the target because they don't know what the target is.
Is it a case, based on your experience, is it a case of people being more aware and understanding of what they don't want and not having clarity? Like, what's the piece that's missing for them around clarity of what they want? They just haven't invested enough time in making sense of it. They're scared of it. They don't think long term. What's the piece that you see as most resistant around that?
They have everyone else's ideas of success and what life should be around that's injected into their life, especially if, it starts from the parents. Like, I don't know, attachment theory was one of the big things in my life, but it starts from the parents. The parents inject what they want. I remember I was coaching someone about 8 months ago. She's a very, very successful plastic surgeon. And she's got a PhD and she runs a team of people, got her own surgery. And I go to her, I go, what's the problem? She goes, I'm stressed. I'm like, why are you stressed? She goes, well, I'm about to do another degree. I was like, you've been studying for 15 years. You're at the top of the tops. Why would you do another degree? Especially if you're stressed. Anyway, long story short, we dug deep into what's going on, and her parents wouldn't accept her unless she was a top plastic surgeon. I go, well, what did you want to be? She goes, a tennis player. I go, well, can you see the problem? Like, you don't actually want to do the degree. You don't want that life. You don't even want to be a surgeon, but you're doing it because your parents wanted you to.
This topic could easily open a can of worms because it's one of my favorite ones to talk about. It, like, the amount of people, and I assume this happens in your world as well, who until they start doing that deep discovery, don't realize that they've been led down a path that isn't necessarily their truth. And values in itself is a significant piece, because unless you're really dialed into your values, you'll often take on the values of your parents, your family, the environment. I know, the values of the eastern suburbs of Sydney might be different to the values of Byron Bay, which might be different to the values of New York. So it's such a significant piece. What's one of the, I guess, tips that you've got for someone who, based on my experience, and I'd be interested in yours, I'd say 99% of people are living someone else's values and living someone else's dream or society's dream. Where do you start with someone in that position?
Great question. And I think one of the biggest things that I do with the clients is differentiate between what's theirs, what's their dream, what's their value, and what everyone else is. And that's the hardest part, because the truth is that when someone comes to me or someone comes to you, they're completely lost. And one of the reasons they're lost is because they have no idea of their own voice. They have no idea what they want. It's the heart. I can ask them, what do you want for dinner? They don't know. They don't mind. But it's not that they don't mind. It's that they don't have the courage to speak up for what they really want. So I think that's the first thing. I was dealing with, I won't go too in depth with too many of these stories, but one of the clients that come to me, every decision that he made was not his decision. It was his dad's decision. So the moment I said, okay, next time you think of that, use your dad's name and say, hey, Dad, it's okay. I got this. And all of a sudden you create separation. And when the separation occurs, then they can start coming out of their own shell, because no longer is their life and their decisions dictated by other people and their environment.
One of the common themes in amongst your work, which you cut up in so many different ways, which I love, is really at the core of it, how many of our business problems are actually personal problems wrapped up as business problems? So whether it's self-worth, limiting beliefs, blind spots, barriers, learning to unlearn patterns. What are some of the most common themes that you see people when it comes to their mindset and how it's having a negative impact on their business?
So I'm a big believer that every single problem that you have is a personal problem. There is no differentiate between, like, it's not a relationship problem, it's not a business problem, it's not a money problem, it's a you problem. And the quicker you can take responsibility and realize that it's a me problem, the quicker you can do something about it. So I don't think there's any business problems, because think about it. Just say the business is doing $1 million a month and it's hit a stumbling block. Well, you can think the business problem is, what's the next strategy? We need a strategy. But the real problem is, why don't you have the next strategy? What's holding you back from investigating and hiring someone or finding the answer? It's not the business that's stuck, because the business is just a reflection of where you're at. I remember I was looking for co-working spaces a few years ago, and I'd always take one of my employees with me, and I walk into this one co-working space, and it's very creative and there's art everywhere and it's like funky. It's like the 80s and whatnot. I said to my employee, I was like, the owner of this place is a very eccentric sort of person. They're old school. They wear some funky clothes. I guarantee they're a little bit woo-woo in the clouds. And she goes, why do you think that? Because I was like, look at this place. It's just a reflection of the owner. The owner created this place. Then we went to the next one, and it was spotless. Nothing was out of order. Everything was in place. And it was an awkward feeling being in there. And I said, watch, the owner here is a perfectionist. Long story short, we meet the owners and they're exactly how I mentioned it. It's not because I'm a fortune teller. It's just because everything is a reflection of what's going on inside. Everything, especially in business. Excuse me.
What are you seeing as common themes when it comes to people in business? What are the most common struggles from a mentality point of view that you've seen?
The number one problem is that the problem they think they have is never the problem.
Mm.
It's the biggest problem, because if you think the problem is there's not enough leads, you'll spend all your time, energy, and money looking for leads. But really, if you dive deeper, the problem is that you're too scared to put yourself out there.
Mm.
So looking for leads is never going to help you. I'll give you two quick stories. Two people walking down the street. One guy was filled with fear. The other guy was filled with gratitude. The person filled with fear, all they saw down that street were threats.
Mm.
The person filled with gratitude, all they saw down that street was opportunities. It's the same street, but actually it's not the same street, because whatever is on the inside manifests in your environment. And that's just how it works. The same happens in business. So if you don't get clarity on the problem that is, you're going to find a solution for the problem that isn't. One of my mentors told me that. And so for me, whenever someone comes to me with a problem, or when I've got a problem, the first thing I do is investigate is, what is the real problem? Because if I don't find what the real problem is, I'm going to spend years, potentially years, thousands of dollars, all my energy trying to solve a problem that doesn't actually exist. It's like the classic gym example. Someone's overweight, they want to lose weight. So what do? They go buy a diet, a meal plan. Then they go hire a personal trainer. Then they go buy every single treadmill and dumbbells and the whole story. And their place is their warehouse, and their garage is packed with all this equipment that they never use. Why? Because they thought that losing weight was the problem, but really their problem is discipline. So they can go solve the weight problem their whole life, but really if they don't solve the discipline problem, which stems from either a deep feeling of inadequacy or not feeling good enough, or comes from their parents or attachment theory, they're never going to lose weight, and they're just wasting their time.
You've spoken a number of times about emotional trauma. What is that, and how do you think that's impacting people? And obviously today, talking more business sense. So maybe how's emotional trauma shown up in day-to-day world, but also how's it shown up in a business world for people?
Gabor Mate, he's a specialist in trauma, I'm sure. Genius. Great. So he says trauma is not what happens to you, it's what happens inside of you. And so 10 people can go through the same event, but 3 people will become successful, 3 people will never do anything in their life, and 4 people will become neutral, right? So it's what happens inside of you. And what happens inside of you is determined by, obviously, what happened in your childhood and all your experiences and everything that made you that person, right? I'll give you a quick example. Back in the day, I've always earned good money. Since I was young, money's never really been a problem for me. But when I was between the ages of maybe 16 to 25, I could never hold on to money. No matter how much I earned, it would always go. Gambling, booze, women, like whatever it is, it would just disappear. And I never had anything to show for it. One day, I went to a seminar, and I really got nothing out of the seminar besides for one sentence. And this guy said, he goes, your money beliefs are actually one of the reasons why you don't have money. Money doesn't grow on trees. Everyone knows that saying. Money is the root of all evil. And I thought to myself, you know what? What if that was actually true for me, but not these cliche ones? What if it was actually true? So I sat with it, and I realized that my parents got divorced when I was 13. And after they got divorced, the only thing they argued about was money. And I was the messenger. So what does that do for a 13-year-old kid? I developed this belief that money is not only bad, it brings pain to the people I love. It brings pain to the people around me. And so that was a traumatic event for me, because something shifted inside. And every time I tried to earn money, I had to get rid of it, because I didn't want to be the person that had lots of this stuff that brought pain to the people that I love. So I guess winding that all back into your question, trauma, all these events that are highly emotional events for us throughout our life, if they're not investigated, if they're not dealt with, then they're going to sabotage every single step that you take. Money, business, relationships, doesn't matter what it is.
I love that story a lot, more than most people will probably realize, because when I look at having gone bankrupt back in the day, it really was like, and had so much time to reflect on it. It really was, like, you can have the skill set all you like, But if you don't have the mindset and you haven't worked through your stuff, it's going to show up at some stage, and potentially, exactly as you said, in some kind of distorted, dysfunctional, disorientated way.
Yeah.
And even this week, I was working with my coach on food, which those that kind of know me might look at me and go, well, he's healthy and fit and whatever else, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I've got the best relationship with food. And one of the common themes for me was feeling really anxious when we have people over for dinner. Like I'd get anxious and I'd be the first one to get up and go and do something. And again, everything we do and don't do stems from somewhere. And I was like, fuck, this isn't a great pattern. So anyway, unpack it. And I hate it. I hated the dinner table as a kid because our family was very dysfunctional and it was always fighting. And I couldn't leave. So it was the one place where my parents essentially had me quote unquote trapped. So I created this like association and relationship to being at the dinner table of like, fuck, I can't get away from this very dysfunctional environment. So I love that you shared that story. And, I think probably you're in a position, with the amount of work that you've done, and I feel really blessed with this, that there's a level of curiosity for us in what we do and don't do, but also in what others do, whether they feel anxious, whether they're showing up on social media, or, whether they're showing up in a relationship, whatever it may be. Nothing is an accident. And to be able to honor that emotional state and then to explore it from a place of interest and curiosity, not judgment, is phenomenal. What else has come up for you? Another story like that where people might start to go, oh, fuck, I've got something similar to that. What else have you noticed over the last, kind of 2 to 5 years of patterns that haven't necessarily served you?
Oh, mate, there's thousands. But here's the thing, like what you just said. Firstly, I got goosebumps when you told that story because I can completely understand and I appreciate the sensitivity, buddy. And as soon as you started talking about it, I thought dinner table as a child, dinner table. It has to be. And one of the things you just asked the question, because language is such a big thing for me, is, it doesn't serve me, but really it served you big time. Totally. Because it was the get out of jail free card. That environment obviously wasn't conducive to your growth at the time. So we build these protection mechanisms to prevent us from going way beyond our threshold of trauma and pain. And, it happens unconsciously and it happens very quickly. And I just think, mate, what a beautiful kid and how intelligent you would have been, and me as well, to be able to have the intelligence unconsciously to deal with a situation like that and put these mechanisms in place to prevent us from completely destroying our lives, right? And then the unwinding process happens, which is kind of what we're both going through now, I guess, and what we always go through.
Before you go into the story, what you said is actually super valuable and may go over the top of some heads in terms of, I'll get you to explain that a little bit further, how essentially as kids, we're very intelligent, but also on an unconscious level in terms of our innate intelligence, which at the time is protecting us. But if we don't work through down the track, becomes dysfunctional. So can you explain what has kind of what you said, but in layman's terms, just for others that are trying to make sense of that, because it's a significant point.
Sure. I'll do my best. I'll do it through an example and I'll explain on the way. When I was in primary school and in high school, I got bullied. Very, very badly bullied. It's one of the most common things that people go through these days, which is just a reflection of where society is at. But because I got bullied so much, it was super painful. I used to go home crying, my parents, it was just all over the shop, and it wasn't a nice place to be. Ironically, the bullied turned into the bully, because the only way that I could survive in the bully scenario is for me to learn how to bully the others, because you can't fight in school, I'll just get expelled. So I had to learn how to bully others, which is a different story altogether. But what happened is, because I got bullied and because it was so painful and so traumatic for me, what do? I unconsciously build these protection mechanisms to save me from the pain. And one of the protection mechanisms was being unemotional. Don't show when you're hurt, because the moment you show that you're hurt, you're throwing fuel onto the fire. The bullies they take it and they poke you and poke you and poke you. And so I developed this cool, calm, and collected persona, which couldn't be hurt, was never vulnerable, would never express how I feel, was never sensitive. Why? Because it protected me from the bullies. Now, that is the protection mechanism that happened on an unconscious level, because I didn't sit down when I was 13 and go, you know what, maybe I got to not be emotional. No, it just kind of happened because, you know, we always want to protect ourselves. So human beings, that's just how it is. Wind the clock forward 10 years, take that person, the little boy who got significantly hurt, built all these great walls of China around him, don't let anyone in, don't show any emotion. Wind the clock forward 10 years ago and get that boy to try and go into a relationship with an intimate relationship. It's never going to work. Why? Because the fundamentals required for an intimate relationship is honesty, vulnerability, sensitivity, authenticity, all the things which I blocked out because at the time I needed to, because if I didn't block it out, it would have been too painful. And so then you got a boy who is now a man who spent 8 years single, dating every different type of woman. I changed the hair color. I changed the profession. I changed the location. I changed the country, because strategy in my mind is what was preventing me from finding someone in a deep connection, where really the only thing preventing me was these massive brick walls that I built around me as a protection mechanism to prevent me from getting hurt. But the walls that we build to protect us at some time also prevent us from finding love, joy, money, whatever it is down the track. I don't know. Does that help?
Mate, it's really good. And yeah, just to kind of, it makes sense at the time. And that's the innate intelligence that our bodies and minds have got to find ways to protect us when we don't have necessarily the healthy understanding of how to protect ourselves. But if that's not worked through down the track, it becomes problematic. And
exactly.
Yeah,
and
all of us are walking around with that.
100%. And just to add on to that, the process of unwinding is incredibly painful. So if there's anyone listening here that, you know, just can't knock it out the park monetary wise or in business or in relationships, and you just can't get there, just remember that the unraveling process is incredibly sensitive. It's painful, it's uncomfortable. And most of the time, the body and the mind are working against you because they don't want to unravel it. Why? Because it's too risky. Because at some point in your life, it was too risky to be seen. So then you don't go on Instagram. To be emotional. So then you don't put yourself out there. You know what I mean? Like everything is linked to what happened before. And just know, like, one of the things that I do is be gentle. Have a gentle touch with yourself, because, you know, I come from the self-development industry, and a lot of the self-development industry is boom, hard, rigid, run through the wall, jump up and down. And I did that. And I just realized, for me personally, it didn't work that much for me. There is a time and a place for it. But what I really needed was a soft, gentle touch.
What does it look like? I don't know how exposed you are to this, but I know for me, you know, one of the pieces that's been really interesting over the last few years is the more I've looked into kind of shadow work, the more I've been really interested in people's approach when it comes to just love and light and essentially spiritual bypassing. But what would be the difference between someone who spiritually bypasses this work and someone who's prepared to tackle it head on?
Good question. For me, I've been on a spiritual journey for a long time. You know, at least once a week, I meet with one of my mentors who's a monk in India. And when we think of spirituality, we think of Instagram quotes, but this guy sits in a room for 15 hours a day and basically plays music, sings, and meditates. He always tells me, Dean, be like a turtle. Remain most of your life in silence. Go from the beach back into the ocean. Do one thing. You know, it's like they eat one type of food. It's all about simple living and high thinking. That's what their principles are. And so I think spiritual bypassing, I mean, it's kind of a theme that goes on in social media and Western civilization, that they use these concepts like spirituality as excuses to not do something. But for me, kind of like what you were saying at the start, spirituality is more about an excursion. It's about being incredibly curious about every area of life. Like if I go drink a glass of water, I think, well, why am I drinking this water? What's actually going on here? Or if I'm eating a certain type of food, you investigate it on a very deep level. And what happens is, there's a movie, Reuben Hurricane Carter, you know, Denzel Washington He played this boxer, the boxer apparently killed someone. He got locked up for life, and he should never have been. Like, he was innocent the whole time. Denzel Washington was in jail, and he said this one quote that stuck with me forever. And he goes, our job is to transcend all the places that hold us captive. And for me, that's spirituality, right? If I need to use an Instagram quote to make me feel better about something, a spiritual quote, or if I need to do something to make myself feel better, then that's kind of just bypassing what needs to be done. And so I think if you investigate all areas of life, food, relationships, health, business, money, your interactions with people, why you do what you do, you can slowly start liberating yourself from everything that holds you captive. And I really think that's to me, to be able to transcend everything that holds you captive. Like, I know I'm going on tangents here, but another thing, people love the rush. They're addicted to the rush. They wake up in the morning, the first thing they do is have coffee. Why? It's a rush. And then the next thing they do is they have some sort of sugary food. Why? Because they're chasing the rush. And then they check their emails, another rush. Then they go on Instagram, another rush. And they compound all these rushes together. And the reason they do it is because it's painful to sit in silence and look at yourself. So all the shit will come up. So the shorter time frame you can have between all the rushes, the less you're going to have to look at what's really going on. And all these things, all these rushes, all these addictions, all these things you do as distractions are really moving you further away from spirituality and liberating yourself. And so to tie everything together, for me, the spiritual process is not to bypass what it really means to be spiritual. And that is, be kind to everyone, have compassion, resolve all your triggers, eat well, be conscious of how you eat, what you do, how you talk, like all of these things. Help your fellow person. This will evolve you spiritually. This will liberate you from all the nonsense that goes on.
What's it looked like for you, say, I don't know, 6 to 10 years ago to now, when it comes to how you might have seen yourself captive previously? And maybe 10 years ago, you're so bliss-free, ignorant that you didn't even see yourself as captive. But how what's that journey look like to where you are now? And what does captivity look like to you now, potentially? Because I'm not sure about how you feel, but I don't know if this work's ever done. So there's always more to work on. But what does that captivity look like from, back in the day to where you're at now?
Great question. And I think the only word that comes up for me is compulsiveness. If you're doing something compulsively, then on some level, you're a slave to whatever's going on. So if you just walk around unconscious, like I was 10 years ago, and I would have a day and I'd be stressed out during the day and I'd pack my workload because I knew no other way. Hey, I've got to work hard, because if they don't respect me when I'm a child, they're going to respect me when I'm an adult. Why? Because I'm going to work my ass off. I'm going to force them to respect me. So that's one of the things. And then after a long day, I'd come home, I'd have a wine, I'd have a beer, I'd have this, I'd go have a fling, I'd go put some money down on the races. All of this compulsive behavior is actually bondage. It's not freedom. I used to think it's freedom, that I had the choice to go and gamble. I had the choice to drink wine. No, freedom is not needing the wine. I used to think that money gave me freedom. But then, every time I'd do a meditation or quiet the mind, I'd think, I'd imagine myself with $10 million more. But now the process has changed. Now I think, how can I imagine myself not needing the money? Imagine not needing the money at all. Imagine not being obsessed with adding 10 million to the bank account. Mate, that's a whole different ballgame, because then if you have money, if you don't have money, it's irrelevant. And that's kind of the difference between before and now. Before I was compulsive, my behavior was very compulsive, which is bondage. If someone said something and it triggered me, it's compulsive behavior. I wasn't able to create that space between someone saying something and me getting affected. Now, everything's more conscious. Someone says something to me, I can take a moment to think about it, or I can take an hour, or I can take 3 days. It doesn't matter. But things are much more conscious the way I respond to everything in life.
If this piece is clear, and obviously if you're willing to share, but how would you feel, how or where would you feel captive now? Like what are the challenges that they're obviously very different from what they used to be. What are the challenges that you're facing now in your world as you continue to take yourself to the next level? What's current for you?
Money's always a big one. because before I couldn't hold on to it, and now I don't want to hold on to it. It's kind of like the exact opposite thing, because about a year ago, I had more money than I've ever had in my whole entire life. Like in the past 3 years, it's been very, very abundant for me. But I realized when I was at the top of the top of the top and just had too much cash to burn, flying all over the world, living in nice places, I'd actually never been more miserable. I'd never been more disconnected. And so I thought to myself, what is going on here? Like, how everything that I was kind of working towards is now enslaving me. And so that's kind of one of the big things now is money for me. And the thought process through it is, okay, so I've got this money, but now I'm worried about keeping it. Now I'm worried about the markets. Now I'm worried about tax. So I'm in Dubai because there's no tax. So now I'm literally manipulating my environment in order to help me keep on to this thing that I didn't have when I was growing up. So now the process was not, how can I get it and keep it? It's now, hold on, why do I really need it? Do I need millions and millions of dollars in the bank account? Do I really need to work that much? Like, what am I doing? Do I need to hoard all this money to save for a rainy day? When you save for a rainy day, you create the rainy day. So forget about saving for the rainy day. You know, one of the monks, he told me this, I love spiritual text, like ancient spiritual scripts. And in Sanskrit, he was telling me about, we talk about money all the time. And he goes, when you get money, money is a form of energy, which we all know, right? But the person that earns the money to pay you for your goods and services, on some level, you're taking on their energy. You're taking on their karma. You're taking on all the stuff that they're giving to you. So he goes, in Sanskrit, in one of these texts, a principle that he lives by is that money comes with 16 different sort of defects, 16 defects. Some of them are jealousy, ego, worry, fear, greed. Like, this is just to name a few. So the way that he lives is when money comes in, a significant portion has to go out. It's a purification method, because if it doesn't go out and you hold on to it, then you're going to take on all the defects, and which is exactly what's going on to me. Now, whether it's true or not is irrelevant, but the principle is beautiful, because I was keeping all the money, even though, you know, I do my own charity work and whatnot. The majority I was keeping and holding on to, and all it was making me is fearful, worried, anxious, jealous, greedy. And so now I'm in the process of purification. How can I move it along? You know, and I don't know, hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, I've never heard anything like that. And it's fascinating. Liked it a lot. I remember Blaise Pascal's one of their quotes along the lines of, man's greatest challenge is sitting with his own thoughts. Yeah. What have you noticed for you? I know for me, I did a 10-day Vipassana, 10-day silent meditation retreat.
Wow.
And it was by far, along with kind of plant medicine, the most insightful stuff I've ever done. But what for you has come in allowing space to sit? Because for most people, as you mentioned earlier, that's the scariest spot for them. But what do you see as the value in creating space to reflect and be with yourself?
I'm going to quote the monk again.
Beautiful.
A different one. He came here one day and I was like, mate, look at you. You travel around the world, you deal with some of the top people on earth, like the kings, the rulers of Sharjah, like he consults all of them. I said to him, excuse me, you're so peaceful, you're so grounded. Like, what are you scared of? Like, what's the number one thing that you're scared of in life? Because money is not a problem. He doesn't care. 6 months of the year, he sleeps outside because it's very grounding. He chooses to sleep outside because he says the moon is a much greater healer. The moonlight is a much greater healer than sunlight. So he chooses to keep himself grounded. He gets healing from the moon. And also it's a very grounding experience when you sleep outside. No beds, no air conditioner. No, it's just bringing yourself back down to earth and reminding yourself, hey, I came from the dirt. I'm going to go back to dirt. Everything's all good. So ask him, what are you afraid of? And immediately he goes, myself. And I thought, that's his number one fear. And I sat with it and I thought, you know what? It's so true. When I sit with myself, I'm scared of losing money. And what if the market crashes? And what if there's a famine? And what if the government forces me to do things that I don't want to do? Like all these things. But the truth is, the only thing that we're scared of is ourselves. Because I sit with these monks and they're not afraid of what the government does. They don't care. They don't think an entity can destroy their soul. Like they just don't, it's just not even a thing for me. But here I am thinking of every single risk of, okay, If I move to Mullumbimby, are there going to be floods? If I stay in Dubai, is there going to be a war? If I go here, is there going to be a famine? They don't care. They don't care because they're in the process of grounding themselves all the time. That is spirituality, liberating yourself from all this nonsense. So, winding it back, the more I sit with myself, the more I realize the only thing that I'm afraid of is myself. And if I can kind of unravel all of that nonsense in my head, all of these patterns that served me at one time, all of these beliefs that served me at one time, all of this conditioning that I've picked up from my parents, which they got from their parents, if I can sit with myself and create space, then all of a sudden, none of the stuff really matters and you can live a much more free life, which is ironic because my second value used to be freedom when I was younger. And actually all I was doing was creating bondage for myself. Because now the true freedom is, the other monk told me another story. He said Socrates back in the day used to go to the markets every Saturday. Every single Saturday he used to go to the markets. And one day one of the owners in like one of the watch stores at the market said to Socrates, you preach all about materialism and it's not good and all of this sort of stuff. And here you are looking at my gold watches every day. Why are you here? He goes, I come here to remind myself of everything that I don't need. And that's kind of liberation because he can walk through these markets and remind himself, I don't need that watch. I don't need that guitar. I don't need all the fancy stuff because I'm free of all this stuff. And that's what happens when you sit in silence.
I like it a lot, mate. Super insightful, and gee, you spend some time with monks. What which I love. What if someone was starting out on this journey of, I guess, discovering themselves, whether that's in a business context or a general context, what would be your advice? What does it look like from a starting point? What does it look like from a starting point in your eyes?
Either call you or call myself.
Good idea.
From a starting point, it's just to start. You know, my brother was in the special forces of the army, and he used to tell me all the time, he goes, Dean, you either make a decision or you don't. That's it. There's no middle ground. So you just make a decision to start, and everything else will unfold. Someone asked me recently, he actually signed up to my business coaching, and immediately I had a conversation with him and I realized he wasn't the right fit. So I refunded him immediately. I was like, take your money back, go somewhere else. You're way too early in the journey. He messages me and he goes, what do you recommend I do? Like, where do I start? I was like, mate, just start. Go on Booktopia, look for a book, pick one that stands out to you and start reading, because the journey of self-discovery starts from you making a decision. The amount of times that I've bought books and courses and read one page and put it on the shelf, you know, or didn't attend the self-development seminar or the course, but 5 years later, I picked up that book and it changed my life. It happens all the time. So one of the things that is deep within my core is not to give specific advice, because my journey is different to someone else's. I think if you can just make a decision and go do something, go sign up to a course, go find a coach, go read a book, it'll take you on your own journey to get where you want to go.
Dean, there's plenty of nuggets, mate. Yours, the monks, and everyone in between. So I've loved it. If people want to find out more about you, the work that you do, where is the best spot for them to find you?
Instagram, Dean Blankfield, easiest way. I'm very inconsistent because I fall off the bandwagon every now and then, but you can find me there, reach out to me. This podcast will be up there soon, and I look forward to chatting to them.
Mate, really good to have you, and love your insights, and definitely plenty of unique thoughts there, which I've never come across as well, which I love as well. So appreciate you, and thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me on, Blake.
Thanks for tuning in this week. As always, if you enjoyed listening, please leave a review, give us a shout out across socials, or share with a friend so that we can continue to share these incredible conversations with more and more people.